Hey, it's day 5 mastermind experience of the family business life 9-day transformation challenge. And let me put something up here because it don't show like it was last time. I moved it for a purpose. There we go. It's Leo here to connect with you, and he's got another guest for a mastermind experience. But before we get to this guest, just want to say personally, this has been a phenomenal challenge for transformation. And we 5 days in, we got 4 more days. And let me just tell you, when you persevere to the end of something, there's a magnificent and mighty reward on the other side. And so, whether you have been following us from the very beginning or you jumped in the middle with, checking on the on demands and looking at the lives, or you just starting with us today, whether you're on YouTube, directly on StreamYard, or on LinkedIn, we're live, all those places. Listen, listen. It is going to be even more challenging and even more transforming. One more thing I want to mention, I kind of failed to mention it yesterday, and that is I want to be very appreciative and thankful for one of the folks who's partnering and sponsoring with us this particular 9-day transformation challenge, Awareness Elevation. They focus on dealing with you having a high performance focus, mindset, and awareness of yourself so that you can achieve at the highest levels over the long term and not necessarily dealing with peaks and valleys and peaks and valleys. All right. And so there's going to be an opportunity as you join the community and connect with some of the different opportunities that exist on the back end of this challenge. There's going to be an opportunity to connect with some of the magnificent options that they have to really take your leadership as a high performance thought process to the next level. So just wanted to make sure that I mentioned these folks over at Awareness Elevation. The other thing is challenge. Listen, we have been talking about this. You got to know that you need to be challenged. Why? Not just because, you got to be uncomfortable to experience growth, but in your challenge is really where your change is. Lynn Ann talked about that. The other aspect is you don't just need to be challenged, you need to take authority for challenging yourself to become intentional about your growth, because only when there's challenge can there be transformation. And really, in the transaction of experiences, situations, and even options is where you're going to be able to transfer to that environment of transformation. Now, I got a special guest on today. It's not like the rest of them, not special. But this one is special to me in the sense that, how we connected, the manner in which we have engaged with regard to the arena of speaking, coaching, and making a difference in people's lives is absolutely unique compared to all the guests that have been on. And just to give you some perspective, so this guest, she and I met in Miami, Florida. We were both a part of the 10X Stages workshop, and after we connected and began to, kind of work together in certain regards, I learned that she had been rescheduling the 10X Stages workshop. I think it was like maybe twice she did that. And the one she decided to go to was the one that I found myself at, and it happened to be the one that was on the time frame of my birthday. So I got a number of gifts, and one of them was that I got to connect with this wonderful woman, Michelle Castillo, who is a real estate investor, a general contractor, and let me tell you, she is none other than the voice empowerment coach, positioning women in leadership and those who got some leadership influence too. She helped me get some voice empowerment, positioning them to discover their voice, to overpower the voice of opinions, and and overwhelm of people who think they just know what they're talking about. They being well meaning, but hey, it's not just working out. And so we're going to come with some empowerment today for your voice with regard to the thought process and perspective of achieving mastery along the lines of family life and business life being teammates, not opponents. Good morning, Michelle. How are you?
Good morning, Leo. I am wonderful. How are you?
Oh my goodness. This is exciting.
I'm
Glad to be
excited.
here. This is like we've been talking about this. We've been, thinking about it, probably been seeing it, but now we see the reality of it and it's like, "Oh my
We're here.
goodness."
We are here.
So as I was kind of bringing you in and talking about, just how we connected and things of that sort, I saw the smile on your face once I brought you in. So what were you thinking about? Like, what was in your mind as Leo was kind of bringing you in, talking about how that connection began?
Yeah, it took me back to that moment where, sometimes we procrastinate something that we're putting off something so that's important that we need to do, right?
Yeah.
And I started to laugh because absolutely right. I have postponed that event twice. And that last time I was just like, I'm not postponing this again. I'm going to this event. This is something that I need, some forward growth that I need, and I'm not going to postpone it. So I just attended an event recently, and one of the things that stuck with me was if you don't want to do it, you have to do it anyways.
Mm,
So
man.
that's why I was smiling.
Man, so I literally was going to bring up that you were attending the 10X Growth Con conference in Las Vegas and kind of, do a debrief with you in regard to, what you experienced and how exciting it was, just kind of all those things, but more so with all of the clarity that you have been getting about yourself, your niche, your problem you solve, the people you serve, like all of those things. Like, how was that conference in regard to you going there before coming to this platform?
Yeah, so it was great. So the conference is essentially about growth, right? So we all have
Yeah.
to put ourselves in the position of being involved in growth, right? We can't just be stagnant. We have to be constantly comfortable with being uncomfortable. So the essence of this event is just to talk about growth, and that can mean different things for different people.
Yeah.
It may be in your personal life, it may be in business, it may be a correlation of the two. So the growth con was amazing. There were so many golden nuggets. I mean, I have notes on my phone that go list long of the different feedback that I'm planning to apply into my personal family life as well as my business. So it was amazing. It was amazing.
So let me share with people really how we got connected. There's two ways. I don't know if you probably think more about the second than the first. The first way we got connected is that we ended up in the same group for our in session speak off thing, where you had to do your 1 minute based on the who do you serve and what problem do you solve type of thing. And you kind of had to do a 1 minute spiel, almost like a little speak off, and everybody voted for each other. And so you begin to tell your story about your experience, as a woman in business and leadership and being an entrepreneur with regard to some of the dynamics of family life, but that was kind of like a minimal part of it. But how we really got connected was Daryl Jones, yourself, and I, we were all in the same group. And what happened is one of the days we were at lunch and I came and sat at the table with you guys. Y'all were talking about marriage and talking about things crashing and burning and all that kind of stuff. And you looked over at me and was like, "So Leo, what do you have to say about that?" I was like, "Hey, I'm just here listening." And so
That's exactly
ultimately both of y'all wrangled my neck to make me say something. And then after that, we're walking back to session, and you're like, hey, I like what you're talking about. Let me know when you're doing something because I want to be a part of it. So,
yes.
so literally talk about what, and this is not about Leo, but I think this will speak to what it is that was emerging in you as I begin to talk with you guys and, share just some of the thoughts that were coming out and even talking about some of the things I was planning to do. What was it that was screaming out in you about why you said, like, I want to connect, I want to work with this guy? And I didn't know it was going to be like this, though. And I'm sure you didn't. But what was screaming out where you were like, nah, I want to be a part of what he's doing?
Yeah, Leo, I think that conversation was so authentic and real, and you know we, we put ourselves in that position to open up and just be transparent with each other about these trials and tribulations that we go through in our lives, right?
Mm,
And the thing that kind of popped out at me, right, and I was like, I need to know more and I need to connect more with Leo, is that first of all, you listened, right?
mm.
So I think that's a big lesson, right? Sometimes we have to be all ears just to really grasp, the intention and where people are coming from and where they're at in their journey at that time, right? And you were amazing at that. And but you also so subtly, suggested a few things too. And we're like, so you kind of grouped me in into like, okay, you gave me something, but enough to where we were like, okay, we need to actually sit down in a setting where we can talk and dig deeper, right? And
Yeah.
so that's so important, is that questions that are asked allow you to think and dig deeper
Mm.
into that experience or what you're going through or that moment. So I was like, oh yeah, Leo, and we just clicked. I think that's just something that happens. We clicked, and I was like, yeah, we're definitely doing something together.
Whatever that is, right? So you mentioned questions, and you and I have done some work together as far as helping to answer two pivotal questions for you. And I'm not going to go into completely, what we did and what we came up with. I kind of alluded to that earlier, but I'm bringing this up because of what you stated regarding, like, you got to ask questions. And so one of the things that we did was we went through an exercise to really provide clarity to what problem do you solve, and bigger than just the problem, what is it that's in you that is a solution you've provided, that you have a fire, no, a problem you've provided a solution for yourself, or accessed it, that you have a fire for others being able to experience the solution for that problem. And we dealt with that in, finding us in a setting to help you get clarity on a clarity call, right? And so, as you said, questions was really the basis of that. It wasn't like, oh, Leo's gonna come and tell you what to think and feel and believe. It's no, no, no. We got to know, like, what's inside. Like, let's do this deep dive. Now, with that, what questions did you ask yourself with regard to you stopping, crashing, and burning with your family life, though there was the vibing and thriving of your business life? Because you got a little story we're going to get to in a moment about how it really crashed and burned like completely. So, what questions did you start asking yourself in being able to position yourself to experience growth on the trajectory of family business life mastery?
So I would say the most important question was, who am I? Right?
Okay.
That was the most important question, because in the process of, and like you mentioned, we're going to go into that story. I was lost. I didn't know who I was. I don't know what my purpose was, what was the goal, what was, it was just, who am I? Who is Michelle? I mean, I have children, husband, but who am I? Like, what do I want? What are my, values? What is it that I'm looking for? And I think that's the most important question anybody should ask themselves is, who are you? Right?
Yeah, yeah.
It tells you your identity. And I went such a long time without knowing who I was, that when somebody asked me that question, I was like, how do I answer that?
So let me ask you this question. So what do you do?
What did I what?
What do you do?
What do I do?
Yeah, what do you do? How do you serve people?
Oh, how do I serve people? So I think I dug deep into the trials and the problems that arose during my marriage and work life, and I dug down into there when I was thinking about who I was, right? And I'm a giver, so I love
Come
to
on.
give, I love to help people, and I find true joy in doing it. It
Mm,
fulfills me, right? that's
yeah.
that's my gift for myself, is allowing myself to give to others. And in that discovery, I realized this is what I need to tap into. We sit so much in the problem, we don't realize that we have solutions, and we get stuck.
Mm, you just
And
dropped the mic right
yeah,
there.
when we get stuck, that's just, it's not a good place to be in. I don't, I remember when I was there, and I don't ever want anybody to be there. And if I can be the voice to help empower others to not feel stuck, then that's my purpose.
Mm, there go the voice empowerment coach, right? And here's the thing, I asked that question because of where you were, and I was like, this would be that moment for them to see the power of when you know who you are and that clarity, because when you talk about it, you light up,
Yeah.
right? It's like, and I like the way you described it too. It's like, I found myself in a position to dig deep into my trials and tribulations. I said, oh, she taking this a different direction. And so talking about trials and tribulations, one of the this story is, I think, one of the most unique stories that I've heard, in the sense that I've heard of people having the experience that you had. There are people I know personally who actually had a similar experience to you. But the way you talk about yours and how yours is, woven, and just the, kind of interesting gushiness about it, it's, when you talk about it, it really is more than just, hey, this happened to me. It's, there's this passion that flows out of it, because it has the purpose of your course of service and impact in it. And so talk to us about the trial and tribulation of the greatest proportion in your life, that you lost, you found, and now you're there, and it was the essence of crashing and burning and eliminating it all in one.
Ooh,
That was good,
yes.
wasn't
This is the, this is the good part, right?
it? Yes.
Yeah, but how it transpires and continues, I think, is even better.
Oh yeah, come on,
Yeah.
bring it, bring it.
Yeah.
I'm gonna let
So
you sit for a little while on this one.
so I'm a woman in construction, right? I'm a general contractor, and I'm thriving in my business. My partners, it's all amazing, but the family life was
Mm,
going down. And why was it going down? So there was no connection between both things, family
mm,
and business. Everything was going great. My husband was not engaged within the business. We had such a difficult time understanding and communicating, um, which is so important. And I tell couples that it's so important to do. You have to communicate, but we'll get to that in a second.
mm,
And at that moment, um, it was very difficult situation. My husband at that time was dealing with inferiority issues, self-esteem issues. My progress in business was basically something that he wasn't happy about, or maybe
Mm.
not content about his own progress in life. He didn't involve himself within my successes, right? So the business successes of the family should have been the family successes, and they weren't. It was more like Michelle's doing her thing and I am not a part of that. And it
Wow.
was because he did not bring himself to be a part of it, right?
Mm.
And we just weren't really connecting there. We just weren't connecting. And that ended up bringing us to, I would say, the worst moment in our lives, but at the same time, the moment that needed to happen in our lives, right? We ended up going through a divorce. We have two
Mm.
boys. It was extremely difficult, as any divorce can go for any family, and we all know that that can be traumatic for the two persons involved, but especially for the kids, right?
Yeah.
And it was hard. It was very difficult. It was very difficult. We were both not in a good place. He was dealing with his things, I was dealing with my things, and we just didn't know how to help each other or even help ourselves at
Yeah.
that point. And it was hard. It
Mm.
was so hard. Like, how could you be thriving in business and your family just crashing to pieces at the
Yeah.
same
Come on,
time?
talk about it.
What was that?
Come on, talk about it. Come
Yeah.
on. Yeah.
Man, I mean, that took me to the worst place in my life where I was just like, who am I? Like, what is going on?
Mm.
Like, what is happening? But what I will say is that I didn't sit there and complain about it and put myself as the victim. What I did was just sit back and kind of took a perspective of, okay, what is this teaching me? What do I
Mm.
need to learn from this? What am I supposed to do now? Because there's a purpose here. Like, there's a reason that this is happening, and how I proceed from here moving forward is going to be that deciding factor, right? So the good thing is
Yeah.
I can tap into that every time I'm going through a struggle, right?
Yeah.
Go ahead. Were you going to say something?
So here's the thing. I don't want you to get to the good part yet because you said something that I think we kind of need to stir in a little bit.
Yeah.
See, I mentioned something about when I was on the VIP Q&A experience with Linan. We kind of, you know, uh, we kind of just, moved around in the shallow, murky waters. I think
Yeah.
we about to step out into the deep a little bit.
Let's do it.
So as you were talking about that point of, first of all, I love how you described it's like, how can my business be thriving and my family be crashing? I'm like, you were one of the people, actually, I think you were one of the first people that I shared my clarity with regard to that. I help business owners, CEOs, and executives to eliminate family life crashing and burning while business life is thriving, vibing. And you looked at me like, really?
Yeah.
It was like, really?
Like, where were you in my life? Just
It's
to
like, where were you when I was crashing and burning? I was like, and that was one of the first moments where, I have this thing where I tell people that when I say that to folks, and they be like, yeah, that's a real problem. They kind of take the conversation over. It was kind of like that with you, to where it was like, yeah, see, and it just what I said, man. Okay, so when you said that, I was like, ooh, she didn't say it because Leo says this, or this is Leo's thing, or this is the platform. Like, y'all gotta know, if you're listening to us, because primarily it's the two of us talking, y'all just get to watch. If you're listening and watching, this is genuine coming from
yeah.
Michelle. This is absolutely authentic. This is like coming up out of her. Like when she said it was vibing, and how could it be vibing over here and crashing over here? Like, that's really her thoughts. Now, with that, when you got to that point, you started to ask, who am I? You started to really question yourself. You talked with me about some of the things you begin to ask yourself, especially in regard to you being a giver, but that giver being interrupted by something. And this awareness that you got was pivotal in even helping you to circle back to the good part of the story. So talk about that questioning experience of the giver and that thing related to the giver that you identified that really helped you really come full circle with being a giver.
Well, um, so let me see if I have the question correct. So, you would you mind repeating that again,
Yeah,
Leo?
I'll ask it differently. So when you when you found yourself at the point to where it just fully and completely crashed,
Okay.
just burned, right? And this is the point where you're like, all right, I'm making it happen over here. Some people would be making it happen over there and say, well, fine, forget this. I'm choosing business and that's it. So they're operating in that misleading belief of just taking, business life and choosing it, making it more important than the family life. You were like, nah, this ain't it. Like, I'm glad I'm thriving in business, but like, it's something to this. And so you really, instead of trying to blame or, deal with, somebody else and what they need to do, you really focused in on yourself. And you talked about, with me specifically, how you are a giver, but you learned there was something about being a giver that you had missed out on that was also affecting how you dealt with communication and connection with your husband. So what was that thing that you discovered? The questions you begin to ask, what was the thing you discovered about you being a giver that really started you to get on the trajectory to where family life could actually begin to thrive like business and even better?
Yes. So, like just like you mentioned, I tapped into that place where I sit and I'm like, if something's going on over here, we got to figure out what brought it to this, right?
Mhm.
Because this is not a one person thing, right? This is, you have to take ownership too and responsibility on your piece of the pie too, right? And and like you mentioned, yes, I'm a giver. I find so much joy in giving, but I ended up realizing when I sat, I would say, in this place, right, where you kind of just sit from like the back end and kind of like replay the movie again slowly so that you can actually see with perspective what's going on or what happened, right? So that you can actually pick out, I see what I did there. I see what I could have done better. I see what we could have done better, right? And what I realized is that as much as I like to give, I was not allowing myself to receive, right?
Mhm.
And this joy that I find in giving is the same joy that somebody else giving and I am receiving receives, right?
Yeah, yeah.
This 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 gratification or this reward, right? Let's call it.
Yeah, yeah.
And I was not receiving everything. I would turn away, as in, I can handle it. I can, no, I'll give, but I don't need anything. You don't need, I don't need the help. I don't need the, and I ended up sitting back and just being like, I don't receive. How can I be such a giver and be fulfilled if I don't also learn how to receive? Receive
Mm.
love, receive words of affirmation, just receive.
Yeah.
And so I had to tone in and get in on the receiving part and just kind of sit back. And whenever I wanted to jump and be like, no, I got it, I would be like, that's wonderful. If you want to help me do this, absolutely, I'll allow you to do that. And and then that was also my way of giving or allowing others to also give to me, and also learn how to receive.
So
That was
tell
that was
so
big.
tell me this. In your evaluation in that moment, what was it? Because this is the point where you and your husband were divorced. I mean, it had completely crashed and burned. It's just you and your boys, and like the co-parenting thing, probably a lot of other stuff, right? When you begin to play back that movie and you realize that receive thing was an issue for you, did you, and I usually try not to ask yes or no questions, but this would, like, I gotta ask this one. For you, was it like, this is why he couldn't be involved in the business?
Mm.
Now you may not have asked yourself that question, but was there an evaluation of it? Like in that picture, did you see that part? Even though you might not have said, that's what it is. Like, did you say this is why he couldn't be involved in the business? Why he felt like he couldn't connect in the business?
That's a good one. I would say absolutely. It absolutely could have been that, right? And I've actually never actually asked that question before, right? But it was it was difficult, Leo. Like it's very difficult for so I'm primarily a lot in my masculine state, right? So I'm a woman in a male dominated industry, so I'm always very, just direct and kind of in my work mode. And I didn't know how to switch that off when I was home,
Mm,
right? And I did something that in this time that I took to recognize, I realized that I wasn't allowing him to be in his masculine self when he needed to be at home, right?
mm,
He's the head of our home, and I was he felt emasculated, and I did that, right?
mm,
And I didn't realize at that moment that that's what I was doing. It wasn't intentional, but however, it happened. And so I had to take ownership for that when I realized that, and I had to apologize, and I did apologize. We
mm.
sat down and talked about it, and that's what that time did, and to put into perspective, right? To kind of just sit back and realize the different things that were happening, that we were not sitting down and communicating and being involved in. It's tough.
Man, I just felt something. We've talked about this before, but the way that you shared that, I felt as if I was your husband hearing that, and how much freedom he probably felt in that moment,
Oof,
right?
yes.
But not just how much freedom, how much he looked at you as a woman of empowerment in your profession, and how you had just empowered his voice, right? Just by giving, right? See, here's what you talked about, emasculating and things of that sort, and all those things are important, but I think it's important to really like bring out the fact that whether it was male or female, what you did was you did what was truly fundamental to your identity that would feed him. Right. That's the thing that a lot of times we don't understand. I kind of talked about this in one of the sessions, and I didn't get into it in this way, but what we've got to understand is we have relationships, and those relationships have roles, but we have roles within those relationships. And what's important is our identity helps to fuel our engagement and interaction in those relationships that actually cause people to experience the depth of value that only they can get from us, right? And it's the same thing with regard to specifically family life and business life and their relationships, that there are things about family life and business life as the two most vital functions and areas of our life, that they are designed to give something to each other that nothing else can give to each other. And if we got business life on this side doing its thing, and family life on this side doing its thing, and there's no, as we talked about in yesterday's lunch and learn, flow in between them, to where they're flowing into one another and out of one another through the appropriate perspectives about how you should deal in these, it's like you're just going to be continuously crashing and burning. Now, here's the question I have to ask you and give you to elaborate on. When you said I was in this mindset for business, and then I would take that home and it would just create problems. I like to argue that when you really when you were coming home, it wasn't that you were bringing the business mindset home. It was actually that you was bringing something different home, because watch this. The business mindset was not what you had to do, but more of how you had to do it. And in order to make it in your business, you had to serve the needs of either the vendors, the clients, your subcontractors, your customer, whatever the case may be. And it meant that you had to have a key and clear understanding of what they needed so that you can serve them. And what you're ultimately telling me is, when you would get home, you didn't, whether you had the clarity or not, you didn't care. You would do whatever you wanted to do and feel how you wanted to feel at home. Is that an accurate way of communicating that?
That is accurate.
Talk about that a little bit. Talk about, as you were doing your reel of a movie and pulling things out, like, how did that come to bear, especially as you and your husband, y'all begin to talk about the perspectives of what you did and how you felt, but then started to learn how to love each other.
Yes. So that is so accurate the way you explained that, but that's absolutely I'm like replaying it. Yes, that's it. Were you here?
No.
But yes, I mean it was just that. So I'm always on a go, let's get it done. It's a checklist. We have to get through all of this. So I would come in with that, and one thing that, we laugh about now, and but back then it was kind of like, all right, you've clocked out of the office, like you're home now. You can relax. And so that was kind of like just the atmosphere. And we laugh about it now, but back then it wasn't something to laugh about. It created tension, right?
Yeah, yeah,
Because we weren't aligned. We weren't teammates. We weren't working together as business and family should be doing, right? And it created problems. It came from more from him, like I was pushing on or giving him things to do instead of, hey, it's family, this is the things that we have to do together as a family, kind of thing. It was just the approach, the way that things were said or requested of, right?
mm,
And
mm,
so this brings me to this topic, is that I had no idea what love languages were.
mm.
It's like, love languages, what's that? And when I studied the love languages, I realized, oh wow, we all receive and give love in different, in different forms, right?
Yeah.
And for him, it was words of affirmation.
Mm.
I'm the kind of person that doesn't really need a pat in the back or that many words. I mean, words of affirmation are good for everybody. We should be
Yeah,
doing words
yeah.
of affirmations with
You don't
ourselves every
thrive on
day,
it. Yeah.
right? But it's not something that it's like required for me to know that I'm on the right path or doing the things that I want to be doing or good. And for him, words of affirmations are everything.
Yeah.
Like that's, and love languages can change over time, but for him, it was so valuable to know that what he was doing was good, and that he was serving the family, and that everything was good. And I had no idea, right?
Yeah.
I had no
Yeah.
idea. So I since I don't need affirmations, I just thought everybody else did it,
Ooh.
you know?
Mm.
Yeah. So when I realized that, I was like, oh, wow. So many opportunities that were missed to just give him those words of affirmation. Just takes 1 second and it would have made all the difference. Right. And for
Mm.
me, is I'm a giver and
Yeah.
I value quality time. So for me, the quality time, like being able to sit in this space right now and have this conversation with you and share this experience with others, like I thrive on this. I enjoy this. Like that's all of me. That's like me
Come
in
on.
in parentheses, if you can add that. And so it's so powerful to know these things, because now you can tune in on that, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So that was huge. That was
Man.
huge.
Oh my goodness. You hit something. You said, oh man, we got to touch on this as we, oh, man, because now you're starting to talk about the good part of the story emerging, and I want to touch on this before we get to it. You said something that really just like leaped in me. You said, because I don't need words of affirmation. It didn't matter. And that was the foundation of my book, I Hate My Wife.
Mm,
See, there are ways that I am to be loved and need to be loved and desire to be loved that I'm good with it. Like, it's good for me to, like, I'm really the physical touch, the words of affirmation guy. Like, I'm a double, and it makes sense, all the energy I got. So, it makes sense I'd have two. Okay, right? So for me, it was the physical touch, words of affirmation. For my wife, it is acts of service, right? And so if it was a physical touch or word of affirmation to her, I was like, that should be good. That should be acceptable. You should be great, right?
yeah.
But deeper than that, what I came to understand was there is a difference in loving someone the way you love yourself or the way you are to be loved and loving them as if you are them, right? Meaning it's important to love that person in such a way that you process life and experiences from their lens to inform and even cause your way of looking at things to emerge. Mm.
That's
Now, being that you've come to this place, because this is what you're telling me I learned not just his language, but I learned how to look at situations and circumstances from his lens to the degree that I begin to put myself in his position. When you begin to do that, like, what began to happen for you guys in y'all's interaction? I mean, at this time, while all of this discovery is taking place, y'all still divorced. Like, what's
yes.
beginning to happen?
Yeah, we yeah, we're divorced, right? And so this is why this moment was so pivotal, right? It is because it allowed us that time to kind of sit in with with the situation and kind of just dig deeper into what was going on. And
Mm,
therapy was a big thing for us. It wasn't open to it at first, but thankfully, because of the kids and in order to basically learn to be able to communicate, right? Because we had to basically learn to communicate with each other, so it didn't come from a, a place of resentment or
mm,
hate, because essentially that wouldn't have benefited anybody, not
yeah,
us, our growth, or and nevertheless not even the kids. So
yeah,
it was so important that we were aligned on making sure that it was a safe space for the kids, which is what brought us to, okay, we need to do this work together to
yeah,
really dig deeper and learn how to communicate. And within this development is where we start realizing all these things, how each, I discovered myself how I wanted to be loved. I didn't know that it was quality time, and and it could change over time. Sometimes for me it's personal touch as
yeah,
well.
yeah.
But I didn't know. Like, you would ask me that question and I was like, I don't
I don't
know. I
know.
just like to be loved. And what does that mean? Right? Yeah, it was like, what does that mean? Like, yeah,
Yeah,
does it mean to be loved? Like, what does that mean to you? And I was just like, I have no idea. Like, who asks these questions, right?
yeah,
So
yeah.
that's why I said at the beginning, it's the question. The
Yes,
question is what gets you thinking, like, oh wow, there's something to this, right?
yeah.
And yeah, it's funny because I just sit back and think, and I'm like, wow, like all these unanswered questions that I had. And it's so important, the question. Just ask yourself the hard question. Like, that's where you really dig in and get deeper into your clarity, right?
So where are you guys today? Like, y'all had the very epitome of crashing and burning while business life was thriving and vibing. And where are things today? Like, y'all went through all of this forgiveness, all of this what's the word? There's a word I'm thinking about. All of this vulnerability and transparency and talking about, hey, I was wrong, this and that. I mean, just all these things. Learning to communicate, that was powerful. Like, learning to communicate. Just let me just say this real quickly. Too many people, like Linnanne said this in a post she made on LinkedIn. She said, I thought I was to automatically know how to, engage with my partner. And she was like, nah, so here it is in business. I'm investing to grow in business. And I'm not investing a fraction of that to grow in my family life because of how the family life fuels and, plays into the business life. And here's the reality: you guys were like, we need to learn how to communicate with each other. Like, all of this happens. And then what does it bring you to? Like, where are you guys today now?
Yeah, so this is the part where I get the most joy of, right? Because the fact that we've been able to come back together, right? So today, my husband and I we're back together. It's amazing. It's, for a lot of people, it doesn't end up turning out that way, but for us, it's, let's say, our happy ending, right? And, or not ending, but our continuation, right?
Happy
Right.
relaunch.
Yeah, happy relaunch, exactly. So,
Yeah.
and it's exciting. It's exciting, Leo, like, to share, because today we're such in a better space, because we learn how to communicate with each other. We learn to understand our love languages, how we want to be loved, how we want to understand, and when something's bothering us, we check in with each other. So this is something that I completely challenge everybody to do. In our businesses, we do weekly, sometimes even daily meetings, right? Check in with your family, like, schedule a day of the week and call it the family check-in. And that day is when the family sits down and checks in on everything that's going on in the week. If there's anything that needs to be addressed, we need to check in. Just like we do in our businesses, we have to do that in our family.
Mhm.
It has to be part of our calendar, and we have to do it. And so we check in with each other now. Like, where are we at? Like, how are you feeling? Is there something going on? Is there something that you need my input in? Is there something that I can offer you as support? Is there something you can help me with? So that's so important now, that we're allowed to give each other and also receive from each other, what we need. And we make sure that we communicate that effectively, right? And I'll tell you the other thing, which leads me to why I think this is so impactful, especially in my case, that I can relate with women that are in leadership roles, right? I was so triggered, and we were just so overwhelmed with all the comments from family, friends, different opinions from strangers on what the family structure should look like.
Mm.
The man should be out working, the woman should be, with the kids and doing all of this. And I'm the total opposite, right? Like, this family dynamic is nothing of that I just said. Like, I am the general contractor, the one that's pursuing the
Yeah.
business, right? And this is what brought this disconnect at the beginning, that brought us apart, is because we were trying to question or justify, why this was different, and kind of fight that, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And there's no fighting that. Like, this is our dynamic. Like, we take great pride. Like, I am the beam and he is the support. I cannot do anything. Like, this beam will fall if I don't have a
Come
support,
on.
you know?
Woo.
And him and my kids are my support. I am the beam.
Yeah.
Powerful. And I get watery because
Man.
yeah, it's intense. And now I have so much clarity that I'm like, this is powerful. Like, I cannot be this beam and this force, right? If I don't have my support system. And this support system now is so strong that allows this beam to not be like, you can't take this down now.
Can't have it.
Yeah,
Mm.
so these comments about, hey, be more, you work too much, or and I'm like, yeah, we wake up and we're working. Guess what? We have to work. Like, this is part of it. Like, we have to work on our families every day. We have to work on our personal development. We have to work in our businesses. Like, in order to, I equal work to oxygen and living. Like, work. Like, this is what we wake up every day. We're blessed. We give thanks and we work.
Mm.
There's nothing to be ashamed of. We don't have to feel, like we're doing something wrong. Like, I'm passionate and I'm going to embrace that. I've been called workaholic. I'm like, okay, I work on my business, I work on my family, I work on myself, Call me a workaholic. I'll put the title right here with pride.
Hold on. No, I'm not gonna do it. I was gonna find a way to put workaholic on the platform.
With pride, with pride. I work on every aspect of my life and I am proud.
Oh, bet you this right here. This is the power of masterminding. So misleading belief number one that causes family life crashing and burning is believing that you can achieve work-life balance. And you literally just said almost everything related to why work-life balance doesn't work. First of all, balance is the wrong measure, but we're not going to get into that. The most important piece that I think you said was like work is like oxygen. And that's what I continue to tell people, that work and life are essentially synonymous, meaning my parents are deceased. All of them. My parents, my grandparents, like, I got some aunts and uncles, but like my parents who influenced my existence, all of them are gone. Can any of them work? No, because they don't have life. And
Yes.
so what you're saying is work is fundamental to life, and work is in family, work is in business, which is why it's so important that people have the right terminologies, the right descriptives of what these functions and areas of our life are, which is why we call it family life and business life, because that's what it is. It's not work life, because work life is just one thing. And truly, work and life are essentially synonymous, to where it's like we're not even talking about the things that are really important. So when it comes to what it is that y'all really begin to come to the conclusion of and say, you know what, it does not matter how other people are doing it. What we need to know is, how do we need to do it? When y'all begin to ask that question and then not only answer it, but walk in it, how did y'all just destroy and debunk all of the different misleading beliefs and opinions and ideas that would just keep you on the crash and burn trajectory, and then find yourselves like really on the thrive and vibe trajectory, and just like taking it home? Like how is it that y'all are starting to thrive now, and it's like just on that peak, on that trajectory where it's like we can't stop ever again? We just gonna win regardless.
So the most important thing here is gaining clarity on what is the vision of the family together, right? Because this
Mm,
is this is a team, right? You have teams
mm.
in your work environment, and your family is a team, right? So like you mentioned, like we're supposed to be teammates, right?
Yeah, yeah.
And when we regrouped as teammates, right, it's like, okay, so what is like what's our journey, right? Like where are we headed? Like what are our goals, right? So to really tap into that and know where we're going as a family kind of just brings us, first of all, clarity. Like in our work life, right? And I reference this because it's in sync. Like we put, we structure, we do a business plan, right? And we hit
Mm-hmm.
and we put targets and goals, short and long-term goals. There's no different in family. Like
Mm,
it's the same thing. We should be able to apply the same things. That's why this should align and should flow, because
mm,
it's the same exact that you apply in business, you should apply in family.
mm.
And when we got clarity on that, because when you don't know where you're going, you just don't know where you're going. It's like you're walking around blindfolded. So there's no blindfolds anymore, right? Because we know
Yeah.
where we're going as a family. We understand what our purpose is, where we're going, what our goals are. And so we understand what each other's roles and who plays what within those roles, so that we can accomplish those goals, right? So now it
Yeah.
doesn't matter what everybody else has to say, because it's our goals. Like we know the pivotal roles that we have to play in order to achieve those goals, and that's what we're doing. Like there's just no other question, because we have clarity. When you don't have clarity on where you're
Mm.
going, the opinions of others start to make you doubt or question if that on the road that you're on. But as long as you know the path that you're on and you've already structured that and you know where you're headed, does it matter what anybody else to say? I mean, they don't know what your roadmap is. You know that.
Mm. My goodness. See, you have. you have really talked about so many of the frameworks of one, the trilogy of transformation, to put yourself on the trajectory of achieving family business life mastery. You've talked about the specifics within that, to where when you start really seeing the traction. But I think the biggest thing is that transparency and vulnerability that really brings out the beauty of, I desire for this to work, but I desire for this to work like it's supposed to work, right? What is it that caused you to come to that place where you said, I love business, I love my family, but I want them to work together? Like, what was it that caused that for you?
So I think it comes down to values, right? And that can mean completely different things for different people. But for me, the family unit is extremely valuable. I don't see myself completely in the right, let's say, headspace, right? If these two things are not okay, like my kids, as I would think to any other parent, are super important. So their emotional, they're supposed to be focused on school and their goals, and you don't want to influence that in any other negative way, right? So for me, it was very difficult to see them going through this situation, and I'm like, you know and at that moment, I didn't know that this would be where we would be at today, and I'm so grateful. But at that moment, I was like, how can I make this a healthy space, right? And at the same time, how can we both grow, right? Because I was so interested in helping him as well, helping each other, helping myself, because that would create a safe space for my children, right? So if
Mm.
he was in a good place and I was in a good place, then we could be in a good place together for our kids, right? And it was just so important to gain that clarity, right? And to
Yeah.
bring ourselves to the point where we were like, okay, here's what's going on. And gratefully today, I mean, thankfully, we found ourselves back together, because love was never the issue. We didn't fall out of love. We just weren't understanding each other. We weren't
Mm.
communicating. The communication was the real cause of the divorce, you
Wow.
know and I want to encourage others. And when I said at the beginning that this separation was the best thing that could have happened, I mean, I don't encourage divorce ever, right? Unless it's like something completely traumatic and has no solution. Like I'm pro, like, making sure that people try to help, but this is a thing of two, right? Both have to be wanting to grow, and in some cases that doesn't happen. But I challenge everyone, like, take those few moments, like, even now, as married, as being back together and married, is that we take our time, our personal time, to kind of be with ourselves, right? To kind of gain perspective, so that we have that moment of clarity alone, right? And then we can come together again, and kind of bring those perspectives back together, and sit down and do those check-ins, like I mentioned earlier. Like,
Hmm.
that's something that, again, I cannot stress that we should all be doing. We check in on weekly, sometimes daily meetings in our work. Like, we need to do the same thing in our families. We have to get more involved with our kids. We have to get more involved with our spouses. We have to understand these love languages, how they want to be loved. Let's how put yourselves in their shoes. How would they want to receive it? Just because you receive in one way doesn't mean that that's the way that fulfills them. Like, let's go that extra mile. Let's work. Work is not a bad thing. Work is oxygen. Like, that is what we thrive on. Like, that's what makes us who we are. And we have to make sure that we're working forward and moving forward, right? Constantly, and get comfortable with being uncomfortable.
Yeah.
Ask the hard questions. It's better to ask the hard questions. Teach our kids how to ask themselves these hard questions, so they have confidence and clarity, and they don't go through all these struggles, right? So that's basically in a nutshell.
Man, you you just took me on a ride right there. I was like, "Oh my goodness, this is good." You talked about, and I like that you kind of circled back as we close this. I like that you circle back and said, you don't want to suggest that divorce is something that people should go through or even encourage them to go through
No.
that. And I know what you're saying, and I'll give you some perspective. I don't know that people, who are watching this really know this, but I find myself at points in times being in the middle of a very unique situation, which is performing wedding ceremonies. I'm able to be a wedding officiant and launch people. See, I don't marry folks because I already married one person. You see, that's a running joke between wedding officials, by the way. Um, I I have the privilege to launch people on their journey of marriage, but also I have the privilege to be able to help them navigate their difficult challenges and seas as a marriage coach. And so one of the things that people don't really talk about is the importance of when things are really, really difficult and it's a huge problem in marriage, like to the degree that you all got, there is a benefit in something called constructive separation, but it's constructive, right? It's designed to really be reflective, to be introspective, so that there's a move toward getting back on the trajectory of oneness and moving in the right direction. So what you're essentially saying is that y'all saw the benefit of separation, but if it had been constructive with great intentionality, there wouldn't have had to be the divorce and all the stuff
Absolutely.
that goes in between that. And so,
Absolutely.
I think it's important that people know that there are better ways to do the things and to handle it. And here's what I mean by that. When I say better ways, like the only answer is not just counseling or therapy, right? I think too many people feel like therapy and counseling is it's like that's going to fix it. That will help. It's very valuable, but it's not the thing that will fix it, because the thing that will fix it is what you've been talking about, is the personal responsibility and the empowerment of the voice in your head that needs to be the one speaking most, and not the opinions, not the ideas, not all those different things. So listen, as we close this, give us some final thoughts, because that was all good. Give us some final thoughts and even share with us, any options you want to offer, any offers you have, ways that people can connect with you, all of that. So go
Um,
ahead, share some things with us.
so I will end with saying, if you don't want to do it, you have to do this, right? You have to do it. So it's uncomfortable when we're in conflict, and sometimes it's just better to make it go away, right?
Yeah, yeah,
That's
yeah.
that seems like it's the easiest thing to do, but essentially it's not. You're not growing. You're not allowing yourself that space to actually dig into the conflict and resolve it, right? And I
Yeah.
challenge everyone to please do not just shush away the conflict. Like, sit in there and get it done. Family is so important. It's so important for your mental and spiritual stability, right? And that reflects into your business as well. Because even if you think your business is thriving, the family conflict will influence your
Mm,
business in a
come
negative
on.
way
Mm,
if you're not 100% in flow and in connection with both, right? So that would be like my one of my biggest suggestions. Second suggestion I would say in terms of family, like, rate conflict between 1 to 10. And this is something that I learned during the growth con this weekend. On one of the speakers is like, rate your family conflict from 1 to 10, and anything below 7, just let it go and sit in on your family check-in meetings weekly that I know you guys are going to benefit from, and sit down and talk on those conflicts, whether it's with the kids, yourselves, and figure out how you're going to do a plan to resolve them, just like you would do in business.
yeah.
So I really challenge everybody to do that. I can be connected with on Instagram. My
Yeah.
Instagram is MichelleGC_investor. So shout out if I can help you, if you need to gain some some perspective in terms of this family and work thing, especially for my women out there that are in these leadership roles. Like that's who I want to help. But it's not just the women. Like, hey men, if you are also dealing with this, like I can give you my perspective as the woman, and I can also give you my perspective feedback back from my husband on how he felt, right? Because this is so important that I understand now with communication, like the things that I was thinking weren't triggering him were, and vice versa. So it's so important to communicate. I cannot stress that is the number one thing. We have to learn how to communicate. We have to. And it's so important. It's pivotal in our businesses, in our family life, in our professional business life. It's just a must. So if we're not good at it, like get going, like start working on it,
Yeah.
because you get good at something by practice, right? So let's eternally practice and continue to get good
Yes.
at it every single day.
I
Yeah,
love that, Michelle.
yeah.
Listen, we're going to do some more of this. Man, this was just magnificent. And the truth of the matter is, those takeaways were key. And even I love what you said as we close. I love what you said, that I certainly focus on the women in leadership, but there's the understanding that, guys, there's a perspective that I have that you need. And so many people need to understand that you've got to have that perspective, you got to have that lens. And when you understand how to go to that opposite side of the seat, the opposite side of the room, and get the value from there to bring it to your side, oh my goodness, it changes the game. So, listen, thank you guys for tuning in. Sorry, we got to go. We're already over about 5 to 6 minutes, but no matter what, the truth of the matter is what you got was some value from Michelle and from us masterminding today. You got to just spy in on our private conversation and get some of the value. And listen, if you want to get more of what's been going on and still going on in this 9-day transformation challenge, you can check it on LinkedIn when it goes live. You can check it on YouTube when it goes live. There's actually a playlist on YouTube so that you can kind of connect with some of the next episodes or challenge experiences. But then you can also go to team3l.com/9-day dash VIP or dash GA. But listen, you go team3l.com, you're going to get there somehow. And you'll be able to catch all of the on-demand experiences as well as the upcoming live experiences, and be in a position to continue to go deeper with us by joining the community. And make sure you connect with Michelle. Listen, she about to drop some value out here because this voice empowerment coach is about to be unleashed. Listen, God bless you all this Sunday morning. We're out of here, and we're going to continue to make sure you're in the position to be challenged to experience transformation. You hear me now?